So now we're going to go in and talk about this app world, all these applications. And it's say it's the world at your fingertip. And there are 4 major app worlds. Microsoft has one for Windows, basically Windows 8, Windows 10. If you're not on Windows 10, you should be on your PC. And then Google has Google Play Store that you've heard me talk to before. And there's a MacBook thing that I could show you here, a MacBook Store, where a lot of applications can be put on the MacBook. And finally, we get the iPhone and the iPad. They say get it on iTunes because that's where their apps are at, but there are other ways. If you go to somebody's website and they say get it, it'll take you actually to the right page for getting something. So those are the 4 major application worlds. As I said earlier, there are millions of developers writing. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry for developers and for these players themselves. So, but you build your own smartphone library. Remember the smartphone library? It's personal. You have a different set of applications that you want. Each one of you is going to have a different set of applications that you want. I'm going to say, we're going to put this all up on the video, okay? It's about your lifestyle. You adapt it to your daily activities and personal interests. As I say, I use Google Maps. But if I'm not driving, I still use Google Maps to tell me when the GO train or GO bus and TTC is going to get me to a location and where I should go and catch it. It's about your friends, your colleagues. Who do you talk to? Your family, your grandchildren, your children, your relatives. It might be people you've got business with. A lot of the people I talk to are the ones I worked with at the Pan Am Games. Okay, so it's a case of, I'm truly trying to get the personal aspect of this. It's your gateway to real-time knowledge, transit times, sports scores, political news, on and on and on. Wikipedia is the biggest library out there. And it's a pathway to sharing your experiences with friends and a repository for your personal activities. So it is, that app store is, how you use it is your personal brand. Okay, and I'll emphasize that again, especially when we talk about Facebook. It's your information companion. Look at all the different areas that it covers. Transportation, news, social networking, weather, communications, document storage, photo, video, finance, entertainment and games, healthcare and medical, sports, utilities, reference, music, books, education, the list goes on. Okay. And so search is basically, you know, you go to the back of a book and there's an index. Search is your index to the internet. You can find anything published on the public internet instantly. Type a name in, you can, if you type in Memory and Company, you will get a link to the website here. If you type in Tim Hortons, you go and find stuff, the Tim Hortons website and information. If you say, what is the Blue Jays score today? It will go and bring you back to a Blue Jays site and so on. Google basically started out as search back in 98, 99. In fact, I was working in California at the time. The internet was evolving and we had these Yahoo and somebody else and somebody else. And there were like 5 or 6 companies developing a search product. We tried to develop a product that sort of aggregated all those search products. And we actually won an award for having the best product new product at Comdex in, I think, 95. But then 3 or 4 years later, Google starts up, again, out of Stanford people, and it has become the primary search engine on the internet. You want to find anything, you want to ask questions. Even as this morning I was saying, how do I transition from one line to a next in PowerPoint, and set that up because I was having an issue last night, and it came back with a bunch of suggested answers. Often I don't have to call tech support because I can find the answers on Google. But they've got all this platform of Chrome, Google Maps. 65% of search market share is Google. And there are 2.2 million searches being carried out per minute around the world. We have a very inquisitive world. Microsoft has Bing and as part of their platform, and they get about 21% of the internet search market share. So the key for search is you start through a browser, and there are different browsers on different platforms. We start out on Windows platforms. Microsoft Edge, or Internet Edge, is their primary browser. They just brought it out a year ago as a new one. It's totally written from scratch. It's much, much better than the one they used to have. I use that. Google has Chrome, and Chrome actually works on all those different platforms. You can get Chrome for Windows machines. You can get Chrome for the Apple devices. You can get Chrome for Android devices, even though that's Google. So that's a big one. And then we have one called Firefox, which was an attempt out of Silicon Valley to build something through an outfit called Mozilla, which I'm not sure how they were financed because they didn't have a really good business model. And they're out there still. They're supposed to come out with something new this fall, but they're probably one of the larger. Finally, all Apple devices have Apple's browser called Safari. So on my MacBook here, I can also run Chrome. I can also run Firefox. On my Windows 10 machine, I can run Chrome and I can run Firefox in addition to the Internet Edge. Safari only runs on Apple devices. So some app examples. News. There's your Globe and Mail. TV. CBC, CTV, Global, all the networks, NBC, ABC, even BBC, some of the networks overseas. Weather. Before I came over this morning, before I got dressed, I went and checked the weather app. Social media, we'll talk about that later, but Facebook's obviously an example. Banking and finance. File sharing, Dropbox is probably one of the biggest for file sharing. Most of my documents are now stored on Dropbox. That means I can get them from anywhere. That's why I could produce these PowerPoint presentations here and run one on that screen off my iPad, because I didn't have to produce it there, but I could go and get it and do that. Radio. A lot of you know about Classic FM in Toronto, but I was in England once 15 years ago, and we learned of this station called Classic FM, which is very interesting. I listen to that often at home. The limitation there with some of these, a lot of these, the limitation is copyright issues and whether or not there's permission to use in other countries. And then communications, I'll talk about this PAMFAX later, but communications is Skype, it's WhatsApp, it's FaceTime, and so on. So here's some statistics that ComScore put together. They're a major supplier of statistics. The most popular apps in the 10 to 34-year-old, interesting enough, is Amazon. How many of you buy stuff off Amazon? This age group generation, I had a young couple living next door to us for 5 years. Every day there was an Amazon box on our doorstep. And Gmail is a big one as a mail application. And for instance, all my mail I have backed up to Gmail as well. So the Apple App Store, here's your home screen. It offers you a lot. As I said, there's 2.2 million apps, so you've got to find ways of getting them. There's their top chart. There's a list of categories, all sorts of categories, social networking, etc. Anyways, they got lots of categories there that you can go and check out. So the installed apps, another screen shows the apps that you've purchased. And then, of course, every one of the diseases with all this App Store is that software developers like to put updates out every 2 days to 3 or 4 weeks. So you go to a screen that says updates, and you can see I've got a bunch of updates at the top and below. Some are the apps that were recently updated that you can open. And then there's a list of all your updated apps, and you can open any of them right from there. And with these updates, they usually try to tell you what they've done to update it. Sometimes it's tweaks. Sometimes it's fix a privacy issue or security issue. Sometimes it's new features, and so on. One of the other problems I'm finding with all this is sometimes you have to get used to new interfaces and user experiences with the upgraded apps. So I say that sometimes some of this activity is done so developers can keep their jobs. Android has its Play Store. There's a home. There's their top charts, their recommended apps. They have an app menu. And the key to this is the second line there, it's My Apps. Okay, so it goes to My Apps and it looks, here's the updates that are pending and some that have been done. Here's a list of all my installed apps. And here's a whole app library. The app library is actually apps that I installed previously and took off. Like when the US Open finishes tonight, I will take the US Open off because it's not of any use until next August. Okay, and otherwise it's using up space. So some apps to benefit seniors. I use this Rexall app, and that way I can go in and I can say, renew my prescription. I don't have to go to the store, I don't have to phone them. I just say, renew this prescription. If the prescriptions run out, they will then call the doctor's office and get a renewal, and I can go in a day later and pick up my prescription. But it basically saves you a phone call or saves an initial call to the drugstore. Okay? So if you're in, and I think Shoppers Drug has similar type application, but you know, if you have a smartphone, this is a smart way. In fact, you can also do it through a web browser. Another one, Uber. Who's heard of Uber? Yeah. Okay, anybody used Uber? Yeah. And I was trying to explain, my wife had to get to church this morning, but I had the car here. So last night we're driving home from my son's birthday party. She says, how do I do this Uber? Well, she has to install the application. She has to assign a credit card to it. But at that point, here's a totally seamless way to do it. You go to Uber. It sees where you are. It shows you what cars are in the neighborhood that are in Uber. It asks you, where do you want to go to? And at what time do you want to go? And the next thing you do is you get an email that says you are going to have somebody coming in a Chevrolet Equinox with license number XXX in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You go down, you go at your front door, the car shows up, they pick you up. Usually you have a nice conversation with the driver. You drop off. All you do is get out of the car. You will then get a receipt from Uber on your phone. You have the option to add a tip, and that. In other words, there's no monetary transaction with the driver. It's seamless, and frankly, they're a lot, for the most part, the cars are a lot cleaner than some of the taxis I've driven in recently, and they're a little more saner than some taxi drivers, I have to say. And then I've talked about Google Maps, so this is where I've said I want to go from here to somewhere. And notice Google Maps gives you an option to use Uber. It'll tell you how much it's roughly going to cost. So there it lists the different alternatives, and it'll tell you if you push something here, it'll say, well, there are also buses coming in 15 minutes and 30 minutes and so on. And, or you can even say, I want to arrive at the Rideau Center at 5 p.m. and it'll find the buses there. So, and then you get your directions as to where it's going. You can get a list of all the stops. It'll tell you, in this case, I think there were 14 stops. And it told me once it dropped me off at the War Memorial area, I still had to walk 400 steps to get to Rideau Center, which meant basically walk across the Rideau Canal. But that's just one example. Again, you're out there, you're looking for getting a ride. You're looking how to use, what is it, Viva up here in Markham? Or you're looking to use a TTC or Go Transit, or you're looking how to drive to a place. And even though I often go downtown to my son's house, it's at Mount Pleasant in Davisville, sometimes it's better to go on the Gardner. Sometimes, especially at rush hour, it's better to go on the Gardner than on the 401 because there's too much congestion. So it really helps for getting around. It really helps for transit. It will tell you how long it takes to walk somewhere. In my case, if I do something to Ottawa, it says it'll take you 7 days to walk there. But I'm just trying to give you some idea of what you can do. And there were transit apps out there, except Google caught up to them all. Windows 10 has a store for apps on your Windows PCs. It's probably the least used one in some sense, partly because developers are looking for revenue streams. They don't see a huge revenue stream here. They see it with Apple, they see it with Android, and so on. But they do have a store. And then there's the Mac App Store that I have even on this machine. Again, a bunch of applications. There's thousands, millions of apps on there. So that gives you an overview of the app stores and how they work. A lot of apps will work on all the platforms. And that's, I've alluded to the fact, like Facebook. I put an entry in on my phone, I can find it in Facebook on my PC, I can find it on that iPad, I can find it on my phone, doesn't matter. That's what I mean by cross-platform. Skype works on everything, okay? I'll show you another app in a moment, but that works cross-platform that I was involved in developing. Spotify, a music app, works on everything. Wire is another app, communications app that I happen to know the founders and done some work with. Instagram, I'll talk about later. Google, all the Google stuff. Weather Network shows up on all these. Kindle, Globe and Mail. So these are examples. I'm just trying to give you an idea. Again, I talked about that cloud. And one of the things the cloud does is allow you to have all these applications running across all these different platforms. There's sort of a game. You know, we found when I was in the software business, and Mary was one of my employees at once 20 years ago, and we were in the software business. She was actually with my hardware company, but I later worked for the top selling utility company of the day. And everybody was trying to protect themselves. And one of the things I found in those businesses was you had certain dealers you authorized to do things. And in the case of the hardware, we said you got to be able to run a networking application, you got to be able to run AutoCAD or sell AutoCAD or something just to make it that they were doing something more than just selling computers. And then Future Shop took over trying to sell computers, which made a mess for us. But on the software side, we found you're better off to let everybody sell your software, you'll get more market share. And now, what Microsoft, for instance, has done is, with the new CEO, he came out and said, look, why can't we run Word on an Apple machine? Why can't we run Excel on an Android device? Why can't we run Outlook on all these devices? And so that's the change that's happening. And it's helped Microsoft significantly. Right? You know, I pay them $17.20 a month to get the full Office suite, and it includes some Skype calling. So it's a whole change of, and by the way, when I get it, I can put, I get that license, I can put it on my MacBook, my Windows machine, my iPad, my iPhone, and my BlackBerry. You don't have to buy any, you know, it's not buy per device or anything like that. So that gives you an idea of the philosophy of how all these different companies are working in terms of realizing there's a bigger market share than our own closed market.